I'm the director of the New Farmer Development Project. Here in New York City, we work with immigrants who have experience farming in their home countries, and we help them start farms here in the region.
And I'm Nati Pesa. I'm the director of the Jewish Farm School. We run a variety of farm-based programs around the country, and we have a 2-acre educational farm in the Hudson Valley about an hour from here.
So both of you are advocating. You're on the younger level, and you're at the
every level.
Every level. Part of this community of empowerment and helping people actualize what is a very good instinct, but what in practice becomes quite a massive amount of logistics, and turns into, you have to really become kind of a ninja if you want to be a farmer in America today. And I think one of the reasons, some of the challenges that are particular in this food shed, which is the most beautiful, perfect watershed food shed combo, what those challenges are.
Well, first I want to say, Severine, I think you did a terrific job on the film. This is the first time seeing it, and I think it did a really, really good job of kind of giving an overview of the incredible, wonderful, beautiful things about farming, and then also the extremely challenging things, and also the range of people who are doing it. It's a really diverse group of people. And so I think we're lucky here in New York City because, like you said, we have 8 million customers. And we have these incredible markets. And my organization is part of Green Market, which is an organization here that I'm sure a lot of you know and are
organizes farmers markets.
Farmers markets here in the city.
The concept of farmers markets in your city.
Right. So we have this incredible connection to markets, and people have access to millions of customers every day. And so I think the great thing about the farmers that I'm specifically working with is that they are part of the immigrant communities. They're bringing food to the immigrant communities here in the city. They know what people want. They can speak the language of people in those communities, and so they're opening farmers markets up to a whole new group of customers that really weren't attracted to the markets before. But I think one of the biggest challenges in our region is just the cost of land. It's just, it's crazy. It's depressing. It's really depressing. And so a lot of the farmers I'm working with, they choose to rent land when they start out. And like someone said in the film, you choose between either investing in your land or investing in your farm business. And so we always tell people, you have to, the most important thing is to get your farm running. So you need equipment, you need supplies, you need to buy seeds, you need to pay your employees, you need to pay yourself. And so if you put all of your money into the land, unfortunately, you're not going to have a lot left over, or maybe probably nothing left over to do that, especially here. And on Long Island now, it's so crazy that, people can't even afford to pass the land on to their family. Even if you have, even if your son or daughter wants to farm, you probably, the state taxes are millions of dollars if you want to pass on your farm. So that's really, I think, one of the biggest challenges here.
Yeah. Well, but before I get to, I want to just reflect. I've just been looking at land in the valley this past week, and it's kind of ironic in the sense we're so close to this market. We have in the Hudson Valley, Columbia County, for instance, has 50 dairy farms for sale right now, and that is because we have been losing dairy farms. Just Wes Swansea was talking about it in the film. Just literally in the year 2009, New England lost 10% of its dairies in 1 year. Because the cost of production of milk was $17 a hundredweight, and the price you could get in the commodity market was $11 a hundredweight. So you're just, it's literally just throwing money, into a big manure pit for farmers who have already been stretched financially. So the dairy sector has really suffered, and there's all this land that was dairy land and has dairy infrastructure and barns and fencing, and some of it is quite dilapidated, but it is nonetheless really valuable infrastructure. You have then in the city an appetite for grass-fed meat, humanely raised pork and chicken, pasture-raised eggs to just like there's an unlimited demand for, really yummy eggs in the city. And so the logical conclusion would be, we will transition this land out of commodity milk and into, direct market, grass-fed beef, grass-fed meat sector. Here we don't have the hyper-consolidated, vertically integrated slaughterhouse, packing house, like megalopolis here in New York State, the way they have in the Midwest and Iowa, where they're doing a lot of other meat production. We don't have that here. We really could be selling, at cost of production and making a profitable business. Unfortunately, a dairy farm, completely destroyed, horrible barns falling into the ground, dairy farm with good land, it's like at least $1 million. And that's even 3.5 hours from the city. And it's almost like this kind of unresolvable, just like deeply problematic situation, and makes me really sad. The good news is that landowners who are moving and who for whom that land is priced at that level are, inevitably interested in that land staying farmed, and so the kind of startup enterprise model that's being adopted all over the valley is to start your land on rented ground. Start your farm on rented ground. And then also to start your farm on rented ground, but then to start your farm on a really profitable model. So, whereas corn, in the Midwest, commodity corn can yield $21 net per year per acre. That's a kind of a typical return on investment after spraying and plowing and disking and tilling and drilling. It's $21 an acre. You can reliably expect to make more than $20,000 an acre if you're selling direct market vegetables, especially if they're organic. So the reason that you see a lot of new business entry on the small scale vegetable scenario or kind of market model is because that's where you can go in with $3,000 worth of tools and all your heart and actually make enough money to maybe afford health insurance, maybe. Maybe not the first year. And so, that I think is that so many businesses start from that small scale, and Pete Johnson, Amy Courtney in this movie, Carter and Wes Swansea, they all started with BR from Hardy Roots, who's not here. They all started on an acre, or less than an acre their first year, and then they were CSA, and then there were 60, and then there were 120, and now Pete, he's growing vegetables on 300 acres, and he's rotating through, but I think he does about 16 acres of greens every year. And that is completely self-funded, he did do some credit card borrowing in the beginning, which is obviously not so advisable, but he built that business from the super teeny, to the scalable where he has all the tractors and equipment and staff to be, able to then afford to send his kids to college. And so that's the kind of successional dynamic that requires a tremendous amount of self-discipline on the part of the farmer. You have to obviously navigate through all the riskiness. Pete just lost his barns, catastrophic barn fire, and up in that fire went $250,000 worth of pork, frozen pork, and chicken. He's charismatic enough in his community that NOFA raised him $1 million to rebuild his barn. It's kind of one of these narratives of you have to be seriously disciplined, but that big things do start small, and those of us who have been in this community for a few years now you see these narratives, and you see this kind of trajectory of these farms and these families, and the kind of successional effect of that enterprise, and the interns who come there and move to that region and then start their own farm, and then and it really is like mushrooms. So I really got annoyed because the New York Times said it was only 1 or 2 acres, and actually the average in the film was more like 56 acres. But I think that the 1 or 2 acres is a very good starting place for a lot of people who are coming from the city. Right. Yeah. As usual. That's great. So I would also say the farmers I work with, a lot of them, they start out of the 22 farmers who've gotten started with our project since 2020,
20 of them are vegetable farmers, just because it's the least sort of resource-intensive way to start farming. And they're all starting, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 acres. And now we have, I would say the average farm size is now probably more like 15, and we have people with, 40 acres. 40 acres of vegetables, so that's a lot. A lot of vegetables.
Let's just say, so 40 vegetables, that's like what, 10 farmers markets worth of vegetables?
Well, probably, maybe 6 markets and 4 CSA groups. Okay. And maybe a little bit of like direct wholesale to stores.
It's a lot. You're seeing kids younger. You're seeing the children when they're still all doughy-eyed and they don't know. So how could you recruit them into this terrible career?
Right. So we do a couple things we have a 2-acre educational farm up in the Hudson Valley. It's on the grounds of an overnight camp. When the camp's in session, we run the farm program for the campers. And when camp's not in session, we do programs for kids, for adults, technical trainings like a beekeeping workshop or a composting workshop, and also programs for school groups and families. And we have an apprenticeship program, so we have 4 farm education apprentices this year who are learning the basics of organic agriculture and agricultural education. And I guess what I was going to speak to was that I kind of see education as this bridge between the novice, young, wide-eyed, really excited person who wants to get into agriculture. That agricultural education, garden, farm, food-based education provides this context that can be kind of a safe learning ground. So we have a farm manager who's been farming for 14 years. She's got a PhD in horticulture. And so she's able to provide a real technical training for these 4 farm apprentices who are kind of like toying with the idea. They're all like post-college, early 20s, toying with the idea of becoming farmers, wanting to learn what it's like. And this is an opportunity for them to basically try it out in a very low-risk environment, get exposure to a variety of techniques, learn tractors, tools, all things like that, and then really, and get a glimpse of what it's like to actually set out on a farm on your own. And the demand for the education is really strong right now.
Really strong.
And I think that as, we see that consciousness around food and the environment is steadily on the rise, so then there's the demand for these types of programs for kids of all ages, and that can often help subsidize the operating costs of a farm. It can also be a distraction from the operating of the farm, depending on how you're set up. Our farm is somewhat neglected right now because we're so full in the summer camp season. But if you design it properly, it becomes this opportunity. It becomes a system where you're actually getting income from both the food you're growing and the programs that you're running. You're providing an interesting array of training and educational experiences, and then you can kind of set people off on a path where they have a better idea of what it means to be a farmer.
Yeah, well, and in order to, subsidizing the training of a craft that takes really 10 years to learn, I'd say is pretty critical. And, and when you're, well, there's my friend Dee, she runs a goat farm. It's like an hour from San Francisco. She says that 20% of your income is just like letting the children touch the goats. And so from a real practical perspective, allowing the public access to something that is, as Antonio says, really a big part of our human experience over the last 10,000 years. That that interaction with the earth and with its force, that's pretty deep inside our consciousness. So, as a farmer, you are essentially the kind of gatekeeper to that interaction that really so many people are craving.
I think that's why people love farmers markets so much too, because you get to meet the farmer's there. You see the person who grew your food, and it's really powerful if you can connect to that person even on a deeper level. And so it's, I think, one of the really beautiful things.
I was going to say that this past week we got requests from multiple parents for photos of their kids with the goats.
Yeah.
And it got a little bit weird, but there's clearly this desire for that.
Well, and isn't that human also? I mean, I really feel like this movement is a direct expression of crisis, humanity, reaction. Period.
Yeah, and the camp that our farm is at is a very unique camp. It's a brand. We're in our second year. It's a completely new type of Jewish overnight camp with a focus on environmentalism, social justice, and spirituality. And the farm is like the cornerstone of the camp. And there's really no place like this. And I think that there's so many parents who are sending their kids there because of what they're seeing kind of in the world right now. And this is a reaction, and this is a haven. This is an oasis of just real positive health in a very holistic way.
And that it's multi-format. I think that's a really critical part, especially since we're in New York City, home of, and we're about to all go over to the Brooklyn Grange, which is on a rooftop in Queens, 3 blocks away. They're growing a bunch of greens on a roof. They're growing at a Jewish camp. There's people who are hospitals that are leasing land, camps, churches. Catholics are also very into farming right now. Peri-urban farming, land trusts that are leasing land to farmers to grow for their food banks. People who are growing in the backyard lots in destroyed urban cities like Detroit, Cleveland, Troy, Milwaukee. You really have, for me to reel off when I'm not staring into the bright lights in an audience, would be 16 pretty well established different channels that people are taking into agriculture. And I feel like that's such a kind of refreshing difference from the impression you get of agriculture if you go out to an farm auction, anywhere 5 hours away from any airport, and it's all white guys, all creaky in their joints, all wearing a seed cab, and just bidding on the equipment of the guy who just went broke, the last. It's. I just came from an oxen driving workshop. I just drove from New Hampshire 6 hours, and it was literally me and about 15 guys who are 76 years old. So we need some more young farmers to get into oxen, but I was so surprised because usually, farm events are just all young women. At least Sustainable Ag events, it's so many fresh-cheeked young women and not quite enough men, but anyway.
Yeah, so I really liked your description of needing to be a ninja in order to farm now. Before being up in the Hudson Valley, I was living in Philadelphia for 7 years. It has a really vibrant urban ag scene, and every community garden, every urban farm in Philly has a different story about how they have the land, how secure that land is, doing amazing things in there. There's a farm called Mill Creek Farm in West Philadelphia that's growing food at affordable prices in a low-income community on a half acre that was vacant for 30 years, and now the city is threatening to develop on it when there's plenty of other vacant lots right in that neighborhood. And the reason why it was vacant is because it was built on top of Mill Creek, so the foundations would collapse, and yet the city's still trying to do that. So there's all these factors that are unique to every single situation, especially in urban environments, and to me it's really inspiring to see the creativity that goes on especially in the urban environments, how people will go about accessing the land and securing it and what they do with it.
Right, so obviously tough, but not boring. A useful challenge. The experiment of agriculture ultimately is, how can we maintain a durable system of engagement with the planet that also nourishes us? So that's the job of agriculture. And so then the job of our generation in agriculture is how do we use that interaction in that system of agriculture and kind of explode it out and have that kind of durable culture inform then the rest of society and the rest of our economy. And in each place that's, you are thrown a certain set of curveballs in doing that. But I think that ultimately that experiment, that question of how do you make a system that, keeps on chugging and builds biomass is one that can absorb all the ambition you would possibly bring to it. And there's tremendous power in being right there next to photosynthesis in our culture. It's really it's a really nice place to be, ultimately. Wait, we didn't even ask them for questions. We just went spieling away. That's the other thing about farming is you have all this time to just think your own thoughts and get your own spiels going. Yeah.
Obviously, the young farm movement hasn't made a tremendous dent in the market, because when you would, industrial agriculture is going to come after you and try to shut you down. Have you done any proactive thinking about how to protect yourselves from this?
Yeah, get lots more of us. And also, you know, it's taken industrial agriculture 30 years to dominate with their monoculture of monopolies our various sectors, particularly beef, pork, corn. And I think that we should expect it take us also 30 years to reclaim a lot of that land and reclaim the grocery distribution systems and the value-added processing and the butcher shops and the bakeries and the local food processing sector that will allow us to slowly replace that system that they have perpetuated.
Yeah, and a couple of things. I think that there's such a demand on the local level, you know, for good food, for food that's, you know, produced in a way that is, you know, sustaining our earth and not in a way that's actively working against it. I think that people at the grassroots level are what are really going to create that demand and kind of turn the tides. And then also, you know, our Secretary of Agriculture called for, what is it? 100,000 new farmers.
100,000.
So our policy is now shifting over to focus. And, you know, someone in the film was saying what we need, it was from the National Campaign for Sustainable Agriculture, that, you know, when our policy shifts, that's, you know, that's really when what we need to be able to create a new system. And that's happening, you know, the USDA is taking notice of what's going on, and the Greenhorns has kind of, I guess you would call a sister organization called the National Young Farmers Coalition, and they're creating a new policy platform for young beginning farmers, and people are really taking note of it, and so I think you know, when that happens, kind of the big ag, they're not going to be able to really do anything. I mean, if the policy tide is shifted.
So I think there's a policy framework situation, and that's, you know, big part of what you can do from where you're sitting if you decide that you do need to stay in the city, is, you know, become policy literate and involved in this next farm bill. But then once you have the political framework, of course, which is determining the course of our events in rural America to a tremendous extent, and particularly in the places where those subsidy dollars are flowing. Even if you have that right policy, you still need the right enterprise to go and repopulate a sector that has really become denuded at every level.
Right, yeah, and I mean, the farmers I'm working with, the reason that they're successful is because they've chosen enterprises that are profitable. So a lot of them are growing these really specific specialty herbs and vegetables that are really specific to the immigrant communities that they're serving. And you know, they're really high value crops that people really want. And so that's what's making them viable businesses.
Question? Oh, well, actually, Michelle and I are both on the board of the National Young Farmer Coalition. And National Young Farmer Sustainable Ag Coalition.
Oh, no, I'm with the New Farmer Development Project.
And she's based here.
With Grow NYC, yeah, in New York City.
Okay, last question.
So it seems to me that a lot of how everyone's understanding this movement of farming is coming through like subsets of potential farmers, and that's a good thing. Like Greenhorns are working with young farmers and shining the light on that, and Michelle, you're working with immigrants, and that's sort of in a context of nationality, and Nati's working with Jewish youth in a sort of religious spiritual context. And so I'm just wondering, considering what Michael Pollan said about how the land-grant universities used to train us in the kind of ag that we want to see, but they're not doing that by and large right now. It seems like what's happening is that these divisions of these communities we're doing it ourselves. And I just wonder if, like, do we trust if we can throw it back at these institutions, you know, especially when we consider how universities are tied up with corporate ag in a lot of cases and research. Do we want that, or do we want to just see what we're doing blow up? You know, there's a challenge of kind of relinking. How could that happen?
Yeah, and even when Congress can't even, you're just like, God, the scale and scope of the problems we face in these government institutions, they just cannot cope. But community sure is going pretty good. Community organizing. I like your question, Patrick.
Yeah, well, Cornell Cooperative Extension actually had a huge part in the start of this project. It was, you know, someone there, and then, you know, the Department of Agriculture and Markets in New York State, and also people at Green Market who kind of came together and thought, you know, we have this wealth of experience and knowledge in our immigrant community, and why not help people, you know, start farms. So, you know, Extension had a huge, which is, you know, part of the land grant system is, you know, the cooperative extension programs. So, you know, they had a huge role in doing this, and so, you know, I guess they're
the binges within the system.
right. So they're right. So there are those people, and I used to work for cooperative extension, and I went to a land grant school, and so yeah, I would say, you know, even in big corporations, there are people there, right, who are potential allies.
Right. I think you kind of find your allies within the institution, and you look for those leverage points. And if you can get someone who's working in that context who can make some decisions, you get them on board. I mean, I think that these institutions are trying to stay relevant also, and if the shape of farming is changing, then they're going to want to be relevant to that, and so if you got to find your allies within that. You know, someone was telling me that, like, the scope of the scale of the USDA, that within the USDA you've got, you know, departments that are making terrible decisions for sustainable agriculture, and departments that are doing amazing things for sustainable agriculture, all under the same umbrella. And so we just got to find those people and try to let our voices be heard.
Yeah, even if the only thing that's useful is their Xerox machine. You know, that's the thing.
I should also say our project is actually 100% funded by the USDA.
Really?
Yeah. By the Risk Management Agency and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Both USDA programs.
Yeah. Other good programs are ATRA and EQIP, just in case you wanted to know other good USDA programs.
Well, we should probably wrap this up pretty
Alan!
soon.
Oh, Alan, can we all give Alan a round of applause?
No.
I'm sorry.
Thank you all for being here. It's a great pleasure, Severine, for riding your ox down, and did you park that outside? I just want to make a couple announcements. First of all, we right after this, we're going over to the Brooklyn Grange Rooftop Farm, which is located, if you just walk outside the door to 37th Street, and then you take a right, then you go 3 blocks to Northern Boulevard. It's the big building right there, and we're going to have 2 film screenings there. It looks like the rain is holding off. If not, we're going to have them inside, and you can still have a peek at the farm. There's a free Rotterburger and a lot of great films, and I think Greenhorns will be kind of have some stuff set up in the lobby. We have some stuff. Brooklyn Grange themselves, who are the farmers of that building, also have some stuff, so it should be a pretty good time. We do have to, I know Greenhorns have some stuff out here, so you're welcome to hang out for a little bit, but we do have to kind of clear this building out because the museum's officially closed now.